Shalom, and welcome to What the Watchman Sees, a ministry that will sift through all of the social media noise to show you news of importance from the Most High's perspective. As watchmen, we are here both to warn of dangers and give biblical answers for dwelling in the secret place of the Most High during these times of confusion. Tell your family and friends to like, share, and subscribe as we delve into what Yahweh has for us, the apple of His eye. Let's get to work. Shalom, everyone. We had mentioned during our Shabbat lesson yesterday, we were going to do a second part. So that's what this is. We have been in Matthew chapter 24, and this time we're going to be in Matthew chapter 25, still asking the question and allowing Scripture to answer, who is Jesus Christ? Who is Yeshua HaMashiach? And just as important, what is our relationship with what we know about who the Savior is? So we're going to continue. First, what we will do is read from Matthew chapter 25. Again, we're reading from the Bible Hub, the Berean literal translation. Okay. Matthew chapter 25, starting at verse 1. Then the kingdom of heavens will be likened to 10 virgins, who having taken their lamps went forth to meet the bridegroom. And 5 of them were foolish and 5 wise. For the foolish, having taken their lamps, took no oil with them, but the wise took oil in vessels with their lamps. And the bridegroom tarrying, they all became drowsy and were sleeping. And at the middle of the night there was a cry, Behold the bridegroom! Go forth to meet him. Then all those virgins arose and trimmed their lamps. And the foolish said to the wise, Give us of your oil, for our lamps are going out. And the wise answered, saying, No, lest it might not suffice for us and you. Go rather to those selling and buy for yourselves. And while they are going away to buy, the bridegroom came, and those ready went in with him to the wedding feast, and the door was shut. And afterward the other virgins come also, saying, Lord, Lord, open to us. And he said, Truly I say to you, I do not know you. Therefore watch, for you do not know the day nor the hour. Verse 14, For it is like a man going on a journey, who called his own servants and delivered his possessions to them. And indeed, to one he gave 5 talents, to one 2, to one 1, to each according to his own ability. And he left the region immediately. The one having received 5 talents, having gone, traded with them, and made 5 more. Likewise, the one with the 2 gained 2 more. But the one having received the 1 talent, having gone away, dug in the ground and hid his master's money. And after much time, the master of those servants comes and takes account with them. And the one having received the 5 talents, having come, brought to him 5 other talents, saying, Master, you did deliver to me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained 5 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will set you over many. Enter into the joy of your master. And the one with the 2 talents, also having come, said, Master, you did deliver to me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained 2 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will set you over many things. Enter into the joy of your master. And the one having received the 1 talent, having come, also said, Master, I knew that you were a hard man, reaping where you didn't sow, gathering where you didn't scatter, and having been afraid, having gone away, I hid your talent in the ground. Look, or behold, you have what is yours. And his master answering him said, Wicked and lazy servant, you knew that I reap where I did not sow and gather from where I did not scatter. Therefore, it behooved you to put my money to the bankers, and having come, I would have received my own with interest. Therefore, take the talent from him and give it to the one having the 10 talents. For to everyone having will be given, and he will have in abundance. But the one not having, even that which he has, will be taken away from him. And cast out the worthless servant into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit upon his throne of glory, and all the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them one from another, as the shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And indeed, he will set the sheep on his right hand and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right hand, Come, those being blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom having been prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I hungered, and you gave me to eat. I thirsted, you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. Naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. Then the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry, or fed you, or thirsty, and gave you drink? And when did we see you a stranger, and took you in, or naked, and clothed you? And when did we see you ailing in prison, or came to you? And the king answering will say to them, Truly I say to you, to the extent you did it to one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did it to me. Then also he will say to those on the left, Depart from me, those being cursed, into the eternal fire, having been prepared for the devil and his angels. For I hungered, and you gave me nothing to eat. I thirsted, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not take me in. Naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me. Then they will also answer, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry, or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not minister to you? Then he will answer them, saying, Truly I say to you, to the extent that you did not do it to one of the least of these, neither did you to me. And these will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. That's Matthew, the full chapter of 25. Okay, so we're doing this asking and answering the question, who is Yeshua? And the reason we're asking that question is because to know Yeshua, we have to know what he did and we have to know what he said if we say we believe in him and want to actually follow him. You don't follow somebody that you don't know, or at least you shouldn't. So in this time that we're living in, because again, this is a second part, these are parables, these are stories that Yeshua gave to his disciples about the nature of the kingdom that he is the king over. And not only the nature of the kingdom, how you get into the kingdom, how you remain in the kingdom. And all of these things were stated in the context of Matthew chapter 24, when he had the conversation with his disciples about the temple as they were coming out of the temple, having had a confrontation with the scribes and the Pharisees. The disciples marveled at the beauty of the temple, and Jesus told them in Matthew chapter 24, you see this temple, none of these stones are even going to be on one another in a very short period of time. So then they asked him those questions. Now, I'm not going to review all of that because you know the story. But in essence, he was telling them, you and your people are about to go through tribulation because you would not receive the blessing that I am to the nation. He was talking specifically to the children of Israel. More specifically, he was talking to those who lived in Judea, and most specifically, when he was talking in Matthew 24, he was talking to those who already had ears to hear. He was talking to his disciples. So when we get to Matthew chapter 25, it's a further continuation of the explanation that Yeshua is giving to his people about what is about to happen and what his people should be preparing themselves to do, so that when it does happen, they will be in the same place of safety that all of the brothers and sisters in the past. Remember, we're still on that theme. History doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. So, that being the case, what we're going to do is follow those words of Yeshua, and we're going to look at them in the context of Matthew 25, having come from Matthew chapter 24. What this slide represents is a part of the same theme that we're talking about. History doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. These are examples of what that means in a biblical sense. There was a flood in Genesis chapter 6. Noah and his family were saved from that flood. The flood in Genesis chapter 6 came because the intent and the thoughts of the hearts of the people on the planet were only inclined toward evil. So the Father said, I have to destroy this world because it has become too evil. But I'm going to save you, Noah. The way that your salvation comes is in the 120 years before I actually destroy the earth. I want you to use that time to prepare yourself for that coming destruction. And the way that you prepare yourself is by building the ark. That's what he did in Genesis chapter 6. That's the historical event that will rhyme in the biblical accounts of subsequent generations. The next time we see it in large measure is in Genesis chapters 18 and 19 with the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. A very similar thing. Sodom and Gomorrah had become so evil, and parenthetically, the evil was not primarily because they were homosexuals. The evil was that they were evil, and everything that they did reflected that evil. So they were willing to rape men, but they also were willing to rape women. They were willing to take people's property that didn't belong to them just because they were strong enough to do it. They had no problem killing people who would not adhere to how their culture was to be seen by everyone who lived in Sodom and Gomorrah. So in other words, every intent of their heart was also evil continually. The Father saw that from heaven, sent 2 angels down, and the angels said, we got to destroy this place. But before we do, Lot, get your family, because we got to get you out before we destroy. So that was the Sodom and Gomorrah. Another example of history not repeating itself, but history rhyming. What history? The history of human beings whose hearts are dark, and the darkness of their hearts has caused the environment they live in to be so polluted that the Father has to wipe it out. The next example was in 2 Kings chapter 18, where the 10 northern tribes, called the Northern Kingdom, were destroyed by the Assyrians. And so that is what happened, and it happened for the same reason. The children in the northern tribes were worshiping other gods. They were causing their own children, their firstborn usually, to be sacrificed to false gods by heating up a piece of metal that was formed into a god with its hands out, and then they would light a fire underneath that piece of metal and set their own children on that piece of metal that was red hot, thus sacrificing their children to that false god. This is what Yah's people were doing. And therefore they had become so evil that the Most High said, I'm bringing the Assyrians against you, and they're going to take you off this land. You're not coming back. That happened. History rhyming. The next time it happened was with the 10 northern tribes, sister tribes, Judah and Benjamin. And that's found in Jeremiah chapter 37, verse 8. Judah and Benjamin were doing the same thing. And actually, the scriptures in Jeremiah say, and Ezekiel say, you're actually worse than the northern tribes, mainly because my word is in you, because Jerusalem is the heart and soul of your nation, and my word is in your nation. You've gone up into my temple, and you have brought the images of idols into my temple. You have actually let people sacrifice unclean animals in my temple. And then you are shedding blood throughout your cities. So I'm bringing the Babylonians against you, because every thought and intent of your hearts is only evil continually. And the Babylonians are going to destroy you and take some of you into captivity and scatter the rest of you. That happened. Then we get to what Yeshua was telling the disciples in Matthew chapter 24, the last lesson that we spoke about. He was talking to them primarily about the soon coming siege of Jerusalem that happened in 60 and 70 AD, where Jerusalem was destroyed. All of the people living in Jerusalem that weren't killed were either scattered or taken into captivity. So he was talking about those things. Now, seeing that these things are going to come to pass, what are you supposed to be doing? Okay, so toward the end of chapter 24, he gives them some of the things that they should be doing and what his expectations for them are. So in essence, what he was doing to the disciples, or with the disciples, was the same thing that the Most High did with Noah and his family as they were preparing for the upcoming flood. Yeshua is telling the disciples in Matthew chapter 24, there's a destruction coming, and here is how you are to prepare yourselves for the destruction. So he began to talk to them about that. In other words, I believe that you believe me. Now, since you believe me, here's what you have to do if you want to be saved. Because once that destruction happens, it's going to happen. And you either are going to be where you're supposed to be and saved, or you're going to be where you're not supposed to be, and you will be destroyed along with all the other people. When we get into the Most High's instructions before the judgment comes, he told Noah, build an ark and save yourself and your family. That was Noah's instructions. For Lot in Sodom and Gomorrah, Lot's instructions were to, first of all, get your family. I should have put that down there. He didn't have enough people in his family except his 2 daughters and his wife. So his other instruction was grab the angel's hand, because you got to leave. And once you grab the angel's hand, flee and don't look back. Well, we know the story about Lot's wife. She had the hand of the angel, but she looked back, and therefore she was destroyed with Sodom and Gomorrah. In Jeremiah, when Jeremiah was given the instructions to save himself, and the people who were listening to him. His instructions were before the Babylonians came to destroy the city and the region. He said, you have to tell your people what they're doing. Now, most of the time, the Most High deals with leaders. So almost all of these examples, these are not just your average people on the street. These are people with influence and power. So the people that Jeremiah was speaking to were in the king's court, including the kings. And he was to tell them their sins and the consequences of their sins had gotten to the point where he said, okay, so because of what you've done, the Babylonians are getting ready to sack this city. So what you should not do is try to fight them. What you should do is surrender to them, and you'll go into captivity, but I will at least spare your life. The king didn't listen. He tried to resist, because this was this was a multi-year process. And that's the other thing. These things don't happen in a flash. They don't happen overnight. They happen over time. Okay. Just like Noah, he had 120 years. Now, we're not sure how long Lot had, but Jeremiah was speaking for years to his people and to the king about that. He was in and out of jail because of the things that he was saying. So this is at the end of all of that time, because in the middle of that time, although the Babylonians had come, what they had done the first time was just tell everybody, okay, we're in charge now. You got to give us money or tribute. They called it tribute. And you got to basically rule the way that we want you to rule. Well, the ruling king didn't want to do that. So he tried to go to Egypt and get some help rather than surrendering himself to them and doing what they said. This is what that third bullet point is talking about. So rather than surrendering to the Babylonians who had already conquered them, at least he would be able to save his life and the life of his family. He chose to fight at the wrong time, and therefore he was destroyed. He watched his family being destroyed. Jeremiah told him all of that would happen. So that's another historical way that the heart of man being out of sync with the will of the Most High causes him great harm. Then we go to the first century disciples. And this is after Yeshua again had taught these things in Matthew chapter 24 to his disciples. He said these things around 33 AD. The Romans didn't actually start conquering them in earnest until like 60 and 70 AD. And the reason I'm saying 60 and 70, again, there was a period of time that transpired. That there were several times when actually the children of Judah were able to stave off their enemy. But because of inner strife, if this sounds familiar, the enemy was able to come back. Because one thing about an enemy, and this is the same thing that we deal with in this century too. One thing about an enemy, if you don't kill them, if you just severely hurt them, once they heal, they're coming right back at you. In the first century, Yeshua was telling the disciples, here's what you're going to need to do. And then in this 21st century, which is why we're looking at it, it's the same thing. The hearts of the people have become so wicked that judgment is going to come. So in each one of these cases, before judgment came, Yah's people were warned, but Yah's people were also given instructions on what to do to be saved from the coming destruction. And that's how we got to Matthew chapter 25. So Matthew chapter 25 is further explanation by parable from Yeshua to his disciples about what they're supposed to be doing. So the first parable of the 10 virgins he gave as a parable to the disciples about the work that they should be doing once they understood this message. And the first part of the work is to keep yourself ready. A lot of lessons have been given on the oil itself and what the oil represented. The oil, in its simplicity, represented the ability to stay ready, because you don't know when the bridegroom is coming, or you don't know when the king is coming. You do know the king is coming. You do know the bridegroom has been getting the house ready for the bride and for the bride's party, but you don't know when he's finished and when he's actually going to show up. So you got to stay ready. Then he gives them another parable, the parable of the talents. This one is really important, because what happened with the Lord of the land was the Lord of the land gave all of his resources to those who were working for him, and told them and gave them the authority to trade on his behalf so that he could keep his business going. The Lord of the land is Yeshua. He has given his disciples, us, his disciples, everything we need to do the work that he has given us to do. What is the work? Go into all the world, teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe everything that I have commanded you. That's the work. And in doing the work, part of the work is preparing yourself. You have to stay ready. How do you stay ready? You're engaged in the work. So the parable of the talents, some people have been given larger assignments than others, but everyone has been given an assignment. So this parable is talking to Yah's people, telling Yah's people, with whatever you have been given, I expect you to increase it. That's the work. As you've been given the word of the Most High, I expect the word of the Most High to produce fruit after itself, which means that you got to do the work of planting the seed. So during the time before judgment comes on this planet, and you as Yah's people live on this planet, your work, just like the work of Noah, just like what Lot was told, your work is to do the work of the master and to be fruitful and make an increase, so that when he does come, when the judgment does come and he calls you into account, he's going to ask you, what did you do with what I gave you? And that's what the parable of the talents is about. Now, this is talking specifically, the talents here are talking about dollars and cents. But the spiritual lesson, because again, this is how history is rhyming, not necessarily completely repeating itself. But for us, the rhyming of the history is, he has expectations for us. Our expectations are not based on what other people have been given. Our expectations are based on what he gave us as his chosen. Okay. So we know how that parable turned itself out. And the one that had the least for a reason. They were not engaged, and they feared the master rather than respected the master. So what they did was they just buried what was given to them. Yasharel, church, have you buried what the Most High gave you? Because if you have, or if you are in the process of doing that, rather than making it work for him, because that's who's the recipient of the work. The recipient of the work is not the servant. The recipient of the work is the master of the servant. If you've been given one talent, did you bury it? In essence, what that story said was the servant with the one talent actually despised his master. And so rather than help the master, he just buried what the master had given him and then gave an excuse. Well, you're a hard man to work for. You reap where you didn't sow. So I ain't giving you nothing. Does that sound familiar? Hopefully what sounds familiar is the man that said, you gave me 5, here's 5 more. So you got 10, Father. You got 10, Master. Okay. So history rhyming again. And then the last example he gives is the parable of the sheep and the goats. What's the work from that parable? Not only do we preach and teach the gospel, but we model the gospel because that's part of the preaching and the teaching. So what does that look like? Yah's people, Yah's nation feeds the hungry. They don't take from the hungry. Yah's people give drink to the thirsty. They don't charge the thirsty for water. Yah's people take in the stranger rather than kicking them out of the community. Yah's people clothe the naked rather than despising the naked. Yah's people visit the sick rather than come up with a way to exploit the sick and suck money out of them. Yah's people visit the imprisoned rather than trying to put an entire population in prison. So this parable of the sheep and the goats, when does this happen? The scriptures say at the end of the age. I should have read that again. Yeah, I think we do need to do that. Well, first of all, let me just finish this, and then we'll end with reading from Matthew directly from the scriptures. Okay, so that's the parable of the sheep and the goats. That's the work. Those are the instructions. Just like Noah's instructions were to build that ark, our instructions are right here. Feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, take in the stranger, clothe the naked, visit the sick, visit the imprisoned. When we do that, that's how we're using the talents that the Most High has given us. That's how we're using the resources that the Most High is giving us. So when we do these things, that gives us focus during these times of tribulation. When we are focused on that, we don't have time to be worried about what's going on in the White House. Yeah, a lot of what's going on in the White House being negative is going to have a negative impact on our community. But if we're doing what the parable of the sheep and the goats was saying, we'll be too busy doing the Father's business to be overrun by that evil system. We're not here to change the evil system. We're here to prepare our hearts and the hearts of others for the incoming kingdom. And now we'll go back specifically to Matthew. So we want to start back in Matthew chapter 24. Again, as we prepare to close, Matthew chapter 24 and Matthew chapter 25 are all a part of the same conversation. Okay. So in Matthew chapter 24, these are all signs of consummation of the age or the end of the age. Okay. As we said before, what age is passing away? The age of the Gentiles is the age that's passing away. What age is coming after that? It's the age of the King, the age of the King of Kings, the age of the Lord of Lords. And where is that age going to be functioning? On the earth. Okay. Now, in the age of the Gentiles, the way that the Gentiles got to be that way was what we've been talking about when it comes to history. Okay, so the history of Yah's people is that he's given us instructions, and when we follow the instructions, there's a blessing. When we don't, there's a curse. When we continue to follow follow after our own desires and paths, then that which the Most High has given us gets taken away. And that's what happened in verse 15, where it talks about the abomination of desolation. The thing that became desolate was the house of Yahuwah. And therefore, the house of Yahuwah was not just the temple, it was the nation and its purpose. So the house of Yahuwah is Israel, is Yasharel. That's the house. Yasharel had become desolate. And so Yeshua, in telling them that, was detailing what that was going to look like. So then when we get down to verse 29, I want you to see how it's written here. It says, and immediately after the tribulation of those days. This is how we know that he's now moving forward in time and speaking prophetically. Well, all of this is his prophetic speaking, but he's speaking for a different time than the disciples at that time were in, because for them the sun didn't get darkened, the moon didn't give its light. He was talking about now. Okay, and so the reason I'm focusing on after the tribulation of those days is because in verse 9 it says, then will they deliver you. I'm sorry, this is Matthew chapter 24 verse 9. It says, then will they deliver you to tribulation and will kill you, and you will be hated by all the nations on account of my name. Now, some of that happened with the disciples because that tribulation was very severe. So there's going to be tribulation, and that becomes important for us as we understand these principles that Yeshua is teaching, because we have been taught that there is such a thing as, quote unquote, the great tribulation. But in actuality, he was talking again to Yah's people, and he was telling Yah's people, there's going to come a time when, but because of your disobedience, you're going to have so much tribulation, it will be tribulation like you've never seen before. But 29 says, and immediately after the tribulation of those days, immediately after the judgment is happening to Yah's people, then the sun's going to be darkened, the moon won't give its light, the stars will fall from the sky. Now we're over in Revelation, and the powers of heavens will be shaken, which is where we're going shortly. And then in verse 30, this is how we know it wasn't for them, it's for us. Verse 30 says, and then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven. First, there's going to be a sign in heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn. This is how we know we're still in the time of the Gentiles. They will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, and he will send his angels with a great trumpet call. Going back to Revelation again, and they will gather together. Here it is again. They will gather together his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth, heavens to the ends thereof. It's the angels that will gather Yah's elect, Yah's chosen one. What's their criteria? That's what we were just looking at in Matthew chapter 25. So that is the lesson. Okay, so when it talks about at that very end, verse 31, when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, and he sits on his throne of glory, and all the nations will be gathered before him, he will separate them one from another. That's what the angels are doing. The angels are separating us as his chosen from those who are not his chosen. It says separates the sheep from the goats. The sheep are those who have been feeding the hungry, satisfying the thirst of the thirsty, taking in strangers. See, we hear in Revelation that the children of the Most High are going to have a mark. This is our mark. The mark is an identifier. This is what identifies the people of the Most High. So before he comes and finally does that, there's great tribulation. But we are kept from being destroyed in that great tribulation because we're working. See, the last thought is things are all happening at the same time. This is a time of great trouble, and this is a time of the great awakening. Both are going on at the same time. Why is that? Because we're still on those two threads, the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman. The seed of the serpent and the woman sometimes have the same experiences, and sometimes they don't. So even in this time that we're living in, 2025, the Most High's people have already been given our assignment, and we've been given the capacity to fulfill that assignment. He didn't tell us as a part of the assignment to be overly concerned with what the seed of the serpent is doing. We know that there's a seed of the serpent. We know that the seed of the serpent is the Babylonian system, and that Babylon is not just one nation. Babylon is a system, and that system is trying to enslave the entire planet. But the scriptures tell us as Yah's people, I've given you assignment, and while all of that is going on, I expect you to do what you've been given to do. Because when I do come, I'm not going to ask you about how many of the enemy you took out with your whatever kind of rifle you have. I'm going to ask you, how many did you feed anybody? Did you tell them about me while you were feeding them? Did you clothe anybody? Did you tell them where those clothes came from? That they're a blessing of the Most High? Are you healing the sick? You know I gave you the power to heal, don't you? Those are the things that he's going to be asking us. And we'll be asking him the same thing. I don't remember seeing you, Lord. When did I do those things? And then he's going to say the same thing to us that we read. Whenever you did that to the least of my brothers, who are his brothers? He's the Son of Man. That means that mankind is his brothers. That's everybody, y'all. So we are to treat everybody the way he just told us. And that's what we will be held accountable to and for. So we give thanks to the Father for sharing those gems, as far as I'm concerned, with us as his people. Father, bless you and keep you. Father, make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. Father, lift up his countenance upon you and give you his shalom.